Welcome to Tech in Translation, the podcast where we break down the complexities of today's most innovative technologies into something we can all understand.
Brought to you by Ironbow Technologies, a next-generation solutions provider. We're committed to helping our customers across the government, education, commercial, and healthcare sectors turn their tech challenges into real, actionable outcomes.
At Ironbow, we believe that technology should be a tool for empowerment, not a source of confusion.
That's why each episode of Tech in Translation is designed to demystify the latest trends, tools, and technologies, making them accessible for everyone, whether you're a seasoned professional or just tech curious.
Join us as we translate complex tech into everyday language, one episode at a time.
Welcome back to Tech in Translation. I'm your host, Tom Wooten. Today we're looking ahead on how cutting-edge technology is redefining the battlefield and shaping the future of national security. From autonomous systems to cyber defense, innovation is happening faster than ever. Joining us is Micah Yount, Sales Strategy Director for DoD here at Ironbow, bringing extensive experience in defense technology and modernization. Micah, can you start by telling us about your work at Ironbow with the Department of Defense and how you've seen technology transform national defense strategies?
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and thanks for having me. As warfare has changed over the years and decades, right now is probably the most change we've seen in such a short amount of time. And there's two real new battlefields that are emerging, and that's space and cyberspace. And certainly with the upcoming confrontations that we will have with some of our largest near-peer enemies, cyberspace is going to be a critical battlefield. And the technology that the Department of Defense is able to deliver to that battlefield is going to be crucial in our success.
We're talking cyberspace. Let's address the threats and challenges. These challenges are more complex than ever. What's making technology such a critical piece of national security and defense strategy more than ever?
Well, Tom, essentially everything on the battlefield is now connected, and it certainly needs to be in order to bring those data-driven decisions to our command and control capabilities, but also that lends itself to vulnerabilities that have to constantly be defended against. It also makes that battlefield not geographic necessarily. Everything is connected in cyberspace, not just in the field of play, so to speak. And so defending that against our near-peer enemies is going to be critical. And it's not just one line of defense. It's the ability to bring concepts such as zero trust to the forefront and say, hey, we can no longer just build a moat around this castle. We have to protect the castle from inside. But we have to assume that the enemy is going to get a breach, and we have to limit the damage that they can do once they do. And so the new technologies, using zero trust architectures and using other technologies and even bringing offensive cyber capabilities and actually bringing the fight to the enemy in cyberspace is going to be one of the priorities for our defenders.
Now, you mentioned vulnerabilities. So let's talk some of the legacy systems. How much of this is being impacted by that tech debt, by the old systems that need to be modernized?
So much of it. The sad truth is that a lot of our DoD systems are legacy. It has been very difficult for the DoD to keep up with the tech refresh cycles that they have needed to. And so you're going to hear a lot of our leaders talk about tech debt. And that's what they're referring to. They're referring to all these legacy systems that really needed to be refreshed and modernized years ago, because we know those are the ones the enemy is going to target, and they're the most vulnerable. But in the meantime, the way the DoD works, you can't just turn something off for several months in order to refresh it. Missions can't stop. They're always on. They're always ongoing. And so you have to find a way to actually integrate those legacy systems first into your new modern solutions so that they can be modernized kind of in a phased approach and over time. And that is the real difficult challenge, is how do you integrate NC3 nuclear systems into a modern technology when those NC3 systems really haven't been modernized since the late 90s?
Well, right. You're looking at some of these legacy systems that were not even meant to be connected to the internet in the first place.
Absolutely, Tom.
So, okay, we're talking modernization of some of these legacy systems, and we have a lot of new technologies that are the buzz in the industry. So let's touch on AI, for example. Artificial intelligence is increasingly helping defense teams process massive amounts of data quickly. So how is AI enhancing real-time decision-making and battlefield operations?
That's a great question, and I would say that currently not enough, but the DoD is making strides, and they're continuing to push the envelope with AI because they know it's going to be needed. One, they know that their near-peer enemy has already made those strides, and most likely has already automated a lot of their decision-making processes. It's all about shortening the kill chain, Tom. When you can take the data that all of our sensors are gathering and get that to the shooter in real time, or get the data that we are getting from those sensors and get that into the hands of our command and control leaders in order to make real data-driven decisions in real time, that is the difference between winning and losing in the battlefield. That is the difference between shortening that kill chain from days to minutes to seconds. And that is really what's going to be required. But the trick with AI is this. You have to know your data in order for AI to really work for you. AI really isn't at that point yet where it can do everything for you. You still have to find ways to be able to categorize your data in order for AI to truly be effective. And I think that's something the DoD is currently struggling with. They have a tremendous amount of data. That part they've got down. What they don't have is the ability to process that data, categorize it, label it, and really get it where it needs to go, and also secure it. And that's where AI is going to help us, but we still have strides to make in getting a handle on that data to truly utilize that AI.
So would you say that would be the next phase of AI and defense adoption will be the data readiness versus the security part of it?
I do. Like our data, we've got a pretty good handle on security. Don't get me wrong, it needs to constantly evolve, and it is. But that data, imagine it just sitting in a huge bin or what we call a data lake today. We need to find better ways to be able to compartmentalize that data so that it gets to the right people that need it in a very timely fashion. And there's one other part to that, Tom, which is the infrastructure. A lot of times companies and even the DoD, they'll see an AI solution, a new bright, shiny thing, and they'll be like, oh, we definitely need that. But the problem is they actually don't have the back-end infrastructure to utilize it. And so we got to make sure that we're the ones educating the DoD and our customers there that before you go and buy that AI solution, you better have the infrastructure in order to actually utilize it. Otherwise, it will fail.
So sticking with the security theme, how are cyber defense strategies evolving to protect, as you said, the critical infrastructure and military operations?
Absolutely. So I mentioned the zero trust concept, which is not a new concept, but it's new to adopt for the Department of Defense. And they're continuing to make strides in zero trust access and data tagging and things of this nature in order to, like I said, the old concept of putting a huge moat or a huge perimeter around your data and just strengthening that over time is no longer a concept that we want to employ. We have to assume that that enemy is going to breach that perimeter. And then it's a matter of compartmentalizing and locking down the data so that if they do breach, I should say when they breach, they only have access to a portion of it instead of the whole thing. The sad truth is that currently, if the enemy can get inside our classified systems, they have access to virtually everything in that system. And that is something that the DoD understands is a huge vulnerability and that they have to change their paradigm on that. I think another key concept is automation. Human factors are the critical failing to a lot of security. And so the ability to start to limit the amount of human intervention that is required for that security, to automate those processes, those scans, all of that stuff that is so quintessential to what security is, we need to remove the human factor from that, or at least limit it, and begin to use AI and ML to automate those processes so that they can happen a lot quicker and a lot more often.
A lot of AI usage, the fears from the masses are this is going to replace people. And you kind of strengthen that argument because, the human error is one of those critical areas of failure within most organizations. Do you think that there are ways to train up to still strengthen that human portion to where they understand what they're doing and what they should not be doing?
I'll tell you this, we're never going to eliminate the human factor, right? Especially when you're talking about warfare. When it comes to taking another life, a human has to make that decision. We're not going to necessarily automate killing on the battlefield, but you can limit how much human interaction has to take place for an action to take place. If we have a breach, I don't want to wait for a person to catch it in a log. I want the AI to immediately see that breach and shut down, or shore up that breach, and then alert a human so that then we can start doing, interdiction as we need to. But I don't want to wait for a human to catch it. I need autonomous systems to be able to catch that beforehand.
So what role would you say the various sectors play, private and public, as far as collaboration in staying ahead of these sophisticated threats?
We play a huge part. Historically, Tom, back in the day, the military industrial complex drove industry innovation. NASA would come up with an invention and then eventually be released to the mass market or the military. It is not like that anymore. Sadly, industry has vastly outpaced the Department of Defense in their ability to innovate. And so now, fortunately, the Department of Defense is looking to industry to help them do it. And it is up to us to take them by the hand and show them this is how we've protected our data. This is how we have automated our systems. Here's how you can do it too. And it's beholden on industry to really walk them through the steps to understand that the way the government works, it just is slow to adoption by its very nature. So we do have to be patient, but we have to push them in the right direction. We have to show them the art of the possible on a daily basis so that they understand they can implement these things too. And then we've really got to start to understand their legacy systems so that we can integrate that into those innovative solutions. If we can't secure the legacy systems, it doesn't matter that we're securing the new ones. Those are the ones that are going to be most vulnerable. So it really takes a complete and total partnership and a trust in both parties in order for us to get them where they need to be. And I'll be honest, the clock is ticking. The conflicts that our DoD leadership sees on the horizon are not in 10 years. They're not even in 5. They're in 2.
You mentioned there needs to be that trust. And I feel like there are masses out there when you hear terms like zero trust, but I have to trust. Well, wait a second. What's the difference between the two? And they don't differentiate between the systems and the humans when it comes to terms like that.
And it is a full concept. But to your point, we never want security to be so tight that it inhibits operations. And that is a huge factor for the Department of Defense. It is actually what has kept them from innovating in their security in the past, is when they have put certain cybersecurity, especially implementations in place, it slowed down operations and our soldiers, sailors, and airmen simply worked around them. We can't have that. They have to be efficient security practices and efficient security platforms so that it does not hinder operations. That is the real key to integrating these new concepts into the fold.
When we're talking the various pieces within the network, you've got your sensors, you've got your log aggregators, you've got a lot of data, a lot of information. And this data collection is giving defense leaders an unprecedented advantage. So how are advanced sensor networks being deployed to improve situational awareness and decision-making on the battlefield?
Broadly, in a single word, but you're exactly right. And I would say in my experience, getting those sensors out there, getting them in place and gathering that data isn't the biggest problem. Again, it's getting that data to the right people in a timely fashion, no matter where that sensor is located. But actually the data gathering, when you think about all the different ways that we have to do that, whether that's on the ground, in the air, in the sea, in cyberspace, and especially in space, we've got the sensor network out there. It's how do we transport that data from that sensor to the user that needs it, to the decision maker or the shooter, in order to shorten that kill chain.
Okay, you mentioned getting the right information to the right people, which that comes right down to communication. You need that reliable, secure communication. So how are innovations in connectivity, like edge computing and 5G, supporting operations and enabling faster responses?
That's a great question, and it definitely is. Iron Bow has really been at the forefront of a lot of that. It's kind of our bread and butter to connect people and bring the most technologically innovative network solutions to the forefront, especially for our DoD and federal customers. And so we've even designed open source ways to do that. One of the things the DoD struggles with is something called vendor lock-in, right? They're hesitant to go with a single vendor's platform for their networks.
Single point of failure.
Exactly. Like, what if that vendor gets breached? Now everything in your system is a vulnerability. And so they have struggled over the years to find something that was a truly open source way. vendors tend to, have proprietary protocols for a lot of their stuff. And so it doesn't integrate with other vendors' solutions. So like SD-WAN is a great example. This innovative solution that's actually been around a long time, but the DoD has really struggled to implement. And one of the reasons why is one entity wants to use vendor X, the other entity wants to use vendor Y, and even another entity wants to use vendor Z.
And they don't talk to each other.
And they do not talk to each other. And so how do you get past that? Well, Ironbow spent a lot of time working on that. And what we discovered is, one, SD-WAN isn't really the solution for the enterprise. You see, the way the DoD enterprises work, they're basically like a service provider. And a service provider solution is not SD-WAN. SD-WAN doesn't really scale to that level. It's much better, to your point, as an edge solution. But then how do you unify all those disparate edge solutions? That's where our unified transport network comes in. It uses a protocol called segment routing version 6 to create a universal underlay that any vendor's SD-WAN can actually ride on top of as the overlay. It still provides you all that dynamic routing capability, all of the goodness, so to speak, that comes with SD-WAN, but in a service provider solution that scales much better, and it literally gives you a universal underlay transport that you can put anything on. And of course, it can use any transmission media, whether it's SATCOM, 5G, traditional Ethernet. All of that can still ride on that universal underlay that SRv6 provides.
Now, is this universal underlay encapsulated, encrypted?
Absolutely. And it uses the IPv6 header to do a lot of its work. And so it's not a huge burden on the network itself. In fact, far less than traditional SD-WAN actually is. And so in that way, you're getting efficiency from your transport while still getting all of that goodness of dynamic routing and kind of self-healing that SD-WAN provides in your network solution as well.
So we've talked a bit about that private and public sector collaboration, but can you share an example where private sector innovations have made a significant impact on defense operations?
Well, I mean, absolutely, especially in the last several years. And I think first and foremost that comes to mind is cloud. Right? For years, the DoD was dead set on building out massive data centers. It was a huge cost, and it was a huge management hurdle to keep tech refreshing as well. And so when industry came up with the concept of cloud data centers and the ability to house your data in a secure cloud that was, not on-prem and basically not your hardware, now it freed you up. Now I can focus on my applications, I can focus on my security, but I'm not totally focused on the lifecycle management of these massive data centers. I don't have to worry about the facility they're housed in. I don't have to worry about the property that they're on.
Yeah, but we're talking DoD, we're talking the government. They like that control.
Absolutely,
so
Tom.
You're handing control over change management and management of your actual hardware to someone else that doesn't necessarily follow your strict change control guidelines.
Well, certainly the lifecycle management of hardware is, but really the way the cloud providers work is they leave the control to you. They leave the orchestration and management of what you're housing on those servers to you. So that does give you a certain amount of control for certain, but you bring up a great point. Cloud technology came upon the scene and the DoD saw the need for it. They were extremely hesitant to adopt it and have still been slow to adopt it. And it is because of that reason right there, but it's also something else. When you're talking about a military environment, you cannot rely on connectivity to that cloud. And so to that end, again, Ironbow decided that we needed to have an innovative way to provide the goodness of the cloud, but the security of an on-prem solution. And that is when we developed our hybrid cloud. And it's actually a hybrid multi-cloud solution that lets you control where your data is. You can have it on-prem. You can move it to the cloud. If you're in a disconnected environment, you still have access to that. You can move your applications and your workloads when you need to and where you need to in case of contingency operations. It gives you the flexibility to really control and manage where your workloads sit. And that's something I was really proud of when we brought that out, because it suddenly you saw the DoD's eyes open to where they could adopt the cloud in this more phased approach. They didn't have to rely on that connectivity to those commercial clouds and give up that control as you spoke of. They were able to retain a lot of that control and if need be, bring all those workloads back down from the commercial cloud, back on-prem in a much smaller scale. So you still don't have these massive data centers. But if you know you're about to enter contingency operations, you can make sure those workloads are on-prem where you need them and still be able to access all that data in a disconnected environment.
What challenges existed in providing that cutting edge technology quickly to our defense systems, defense teams?
Yeah, and 100%, these solutions don't really, lend themselves to rapid deployment, I would say. But, being able to already have gone through the pains of doing this in a lab setting, I think was integral to be able to roll that out faster. In other words, Iron Bow makes sure that they have tested a lot of their solutions before bringing them to the customer, so to speak. And we have such a great knowledge base of their environment because so many of our employees used to be military members and DoD employees. And so I think that knowledge, knowing kind of in advance the hurdles we were going to run into, helped us already develop strategies to overcome those hurdles and challenges and get those solutions out to the customer even faster. And to your point, so we were able to roll out a hybrid cloud solution for DISA, the Defense Information Organization, and we were able to do so in a fairly rapid manner because we had such a great knowledge base of the DISA environment.
Now, we look at that success story, but you can always see the opportunities for improvement, or OFIs, or lessons learned. How could you have improved that process?
Well, I think maybe just engagement with the customer earlier and even more often. Sometimes, we are hesitant to ask the tough questions to the customer and at risk of making them feel uncomfortable or exposing themselves too much. Even though a lot of our guys have clearances, the DoD is hesitant to discuss all of their current challenges with us at risk of exposing some type of vulnerability. But I think just, building that trust with them so that we understood even more so what hazards and hurdles we were going to run into, that probably would have sped up that process maybe even more. And I think that more than anything is the key.
So when you look at this whole scenario, this whole landscape moving forward, what do you see as far as emerging technologies? What do you think is going to define the battlefield of the future? There's a lot of new technologies out there. What's your opinion on that?
There are, and some are certainly more suited for the Department of Defense than others. And like I said, they're very slow to adopt just because of the nature of their environments and what their business is, which is, protection and mission that can't stop. But as we've discussed, artificial intelligence is going to be key. There's no doubt about it. Space technology and taking some of our terrestrial technologies and bringing them up into space is also going to be critical. And then automation of, again, a lot of these processes is really what's going to help shorten that kill chain and get us in the fight faster. I think a lot of that technology is going to be the first things you see implemented. I don't think it's going to be some of the stuff that's really, truly cutting edge because I don't think the DoD is going to have time to adopt it. But it is going to have time to adopt things like artificial intelligence, SD-WAN, hybrid cloud, all of these things that really aren't that new to industry, but are certainly new to implementation by the Department of Defense and certainly have been implemented by their near-peer enemies. Those are the things we're really going to have to rely on. And then cybersecurity. Cybersecurity and our ability to do offensive and defensive cyber operations, there's a lot of room for innovation there. And I think that is one of the places where they're adopting it the fastest.
So we talked in the OFIs, a big piece of that is communication earlier, more enhanced communication. How can the DoD and the private sector work together better to ensure that innovation continues to meet evolving threats of tomorrow? Would you say communication is a main piece of that, or would you expand upon that?
Well, communication is a main piece of that for sure, and constant communication. We can't do a fire and forget, so to speak, when we implement a solution. We have to be there during the fight. And that may mean literally physically being there during the fight, but certainly it means being ready to troubleshoot problems, to immediately face challenges that we can't even foresee happening in real time. So I think it's the notion that industry in the past has sold a solution or a product to the government and the Department of Defense, and then we high five and go, okay, moving on to the next thing. Well, no, it is a constant partnership once that solution is in place to ensure that solution is providing the customer the capability that they need to ensure that mission goes forward and is not interrupted.
So you're looking cradle to grave, a much more thorough engagement process.
Yes, and I think to that end, the DoD is adopting more as-a-service solutions and concepts. And that's what I mean by industry may actually be on the battlefield with the DoD, because they've already decided, I don't have the time to sit here and manage this. I need to be in the fight. I need industry to be the one who's keeping the lights on. And so you notice that the DoD is putting contracts out for a lot more concepts as a service, a lot more capabilities as a service.
So, Micah, if there was one message about the future of defense tech you'd like listeners to take away, what would it be?
It's that we are doing all the things you just described. We are in great partnerships with the DoD across the globe, and that we are working together on a daily basis to ensure that they're ready. I mentioned before, we don't have a lot of time. This is not something that the DoD thinks that they have 10 years for or even 5 years for. And so we have to constantly and are constantly engaged with them to ensure that these solutions are being implemented as quickly as possible, but that also they will be reliable and ready for the fight. In my personal 25 years now working with the DoD, I've never seen such a close relationship with industry, and really such a close relationship interdepartmental as well, whether that's within organizations inside the Air Force or Army, or literally between the military departments like the Army and the Air Force, working together to solve these problems together, because they know they're out of time. And all the bureaucratic things that got in the way before, we can't let them get in the way this time.
So thorough engagement from cradle to grave, key relationships, maintaining communications. This is great stuff. Thanks, Micah. I greatly appreciate you sharing your expertise on how technology is redefining today's battlefield and shaping the future of national security. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss future insights. And for more resources on defense technology and innovation, visit ironbow.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.